Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Mr. Rocks. Today we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of functionality to our PhatKids game, and we're going to add an enemy. I've gone ahead and I put an enemy into the library. This is just a triangle. Actually, it's a polystar. It's a three-pointed polystar, and I just put a little circle on it just to have something to shoot out. Later on, we'll put our gun and we'll have bullets and so forth. But this is our enemy. This is what we're starting off with. Notice he's not on the main stage. When I go to main game, at this point, in the first part, or in the first lesson, what I did is I created three different rectangles: game area, menu area, and info area. I've created variables called GA, MA, and IA, and I go ahead in the main function. Now, this is my document class. This is attached to the main stage, so this is where the program starts. When I run the program, I come into main game, and I set the game area, I set the menu area, and I set the info area with these functions down here. I simply instantiate the rectangle, give it a location, add it to the stage, and if I were to run this right now, I would get this. This is the game area, this is the menu area, this is the information area. I'm going to save this little bit over here for a timer later on. Right now, there's nothing in those. We'll add functionality to those later on. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go into my library, and I'm going to go into, I've got to go into PhatKids first. Go into my library, I'm going to choose this enemy, and I'm going to go ahead and by clicking on the little I information button, I go into enemy, and I've got an enemy class. To go to my enemy class, I just click on this, and I see that I already had written this code earlier. I'm going to import from the Flash package display movie clip, and notice that enemy extends movie clip, and that means that all of the methods and all of the properties of a movie clip get extended to enemy. So I've got all of the, for instance, the X and the Y coordinate are properties. So what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to go ahead and add an event listener, and the purpose of this event listener is going to be that every time I enter a frame, I'm going to go ahead and sort of update the location of my enemy. And so I'm going to say event enter frame, and I'll go ahead and create a function. I'll call it something like, let's say, enemy update, or update enemy. Okay, now when I do this, I'm going to go ahead and create a function down here. I'll go ahead and make it public so the scope is available to the entire program. And this function is going to be called update enemy. So I can just make sure I have exactly the same spelling, upper and lower case, by going like that, and it's not going to return anything, so I'll hit void. And the one thing I have to remember when I use an event listener is I need to accept a parameter, which in this case is going to be whatever I have up here, an event. I'm going to have an event down here. So my parameter is EVT. I don't think I'm going to need that for this project, but I'm going to go ahead and say this X. So every enemy is going to have this code embedded in it. So this refers to the particular enemy in which this code happens to be embedded. So it's got an X location, and I'm going to say this X plus, and what I want to do is I'm going to set it up so that I'm going to change its X and Y value every time I enter the frame. So I choose its X location, and I'm going to add to that. I'm going to choose math dot cosine, and inside this I'm going to take the angle of whatever this happens to be. So each enemy is going to have its own angle of orientation, and I'm going to multiply that by the speed. Now notice up on top I've already set the speed. The speed is a random value between 5 and 15 more than 5 is 20. So it's going to take a percentage of 15, add 5 to it. So I'll get some random number between 5 and 20. The problem with this is I need to have the rotation, so I can say this dot rotation, but I got to do something else, and that's the problem is this guy is let's see, the rotation is in degrees, and math.cosine wants radian measure, and so I have to do this simple conversion, and I'm going to go ahead and say math dot pi. Oh wait, I've got to do let's see, rotation, and then I'm going to do 180 times math.py. I think that's it. Anyway, let's go ahead and try this and see. I've got the x value. Remember, cosine is along the x-axis and along the y-axis. I'm going to change this to y. I'll change this to y. And so sine gives me the up and down or y value. And that should do it. Just out of curiosity, let's go ahead and see what this looks like. If I go ahead right now and take an enemy out of there, out of the library, put on the stage, whoops, and then run this guy, let's see what happens. Yeah, that works fine. So he's running right along that axis. If I change his axis of orientation, the whole point of the rotation thing is it's going to go ahead and look at where this guy is pointing, and it's going to move it along that same axis. Okay, so that's good. At this point, let's go ahead. I've got my enemy pretty well done. I've got my speed, choosing a random number between 5 and 20. Add event listener. Every time I enter the frame, I'm going to update the enemy. This function is simply going to take the x location and add to that x location speed times, it's going to take the cosine. So whatever this angle is, whatever the angle is of this movie clip, I'm going to convert that to radian value, and it's going to find the cosine is going to give me a measurement, multiply that by speed, and so it's going to be moving in that direction. So having done all that, let's go ahead and change this so I don't have to pull this out of the library manually before the program runs, but I'll do it dynamically as the program is running. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and create a function. I'm going to add another event listener, and this is going to be added to the stage. And in this case, what I'm going to do, and I spelled that wrong. What did I do with my two A's? Add event listener. Good. I'm going to go ahead and every time I enter the frame, so I'm going to say event, and this is going to be enter frame. And let's see, with enter frame, I'm going to, what am I going to do? I'm going to go ahead and let's say update game. So all of my game updates are going to be here, and I'm going to go ahead and say fine. Let's go ahead and put public function. And the public function I'm going to do again is update game. And this game is not going to, this function is not going to return anything. And the first thing I'm going to go ahead and add in here is update enemy. Okay, so I'm going to update other things, but for right now I'm going to update enemy. And to do that, I'm going to call this function. Now, this is going to get called every time I enter the frame because I've got my event listener. Every time I enter the frame, I'm going to update everything in the game, but the first thing I'm going to do is the enemy. So again, public function, and it's update enemy, and I don't have to return anything. And all I'm going to do here, let's see, I think what I'll do here is, I guess what I have to do at this point is create an enemy. So I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to go ahead and just abbreviate it enmy. It's going to be of type enemy, and this is going to be equal to new enemy. Okay, so I've instantiated, I've created an instance, and so that means I've instantiated this, and my particular instance is enmy. That's a enemy class. So this object, or this instance of the class is an object, and I'm going to go ahead and give it an x value. So enmy.x equals. And this is where it's going to first appear on the stage. And so I'm going to go ahead and give it a random value. I'm going to say math.random, and I'll multiply that times Let's do the stage width. Let's just say stage dot stage width. And so it's going to give me a percentage of the stage width. And that's it. And I can do the same thing for the Y value. So I'll just copy that and I'll say instead of stage enemy.x, I'll do a Y here. And here I'm going to do, instead of width, I'll do height. So I'm going to get a random, this is going to give me a random percentage of the stage width. This is going to be a random percentage of the stage height. So I get my X and my Y values. I think I'll also do, since it's going to move in the direction of the orientation, I'll go ahead and change the rotation. So I'll take enmy dot rotation. And I can also choose a random number for that. And I can say math dot random. And in this case, instead of multiplying it by the height of the width, I'll just multiply it by, I'll get a percentage of 360. So it'll be somewhere between 0 and 360. And the last thing I need to do is I need to add this to the stage. And to do that, I'm just going to say Addchild, and I'll put enmy. And that should do it. Let's see what this does. And nothing is showing up. And the reason is that I've called this guy from an event listener. I'm doing update game, but I don't have my event here. So I need to put that in. Let's go ahead and see. And now every time I enter a frame, I am spawning a new ship. Too many ships, it's going to go ahead and go to, it's going to crash the program basically. So what I can do is I only want to spawn a ship if I have a certain number. So let me go ahead and write an if statement. And I'm going to go ahead and say if, let's go ahead and say enemy count is less than 11. So I'm going to get 10. And what I'll do here is I'll give it a curly bracket, another curly bracket down here. Now, what I'm going to do is inside this, every time I spawn a new ship, I'm going to go ahead and every time I spawn a new enemy, I'm going to go ahead and update this guy. So I'm going to say enmy count plus plus. So I've incremented that value. Let's go ahead and line this up. I'll hit this guy, and it tells me I've got an error. I wonder why. There it goes. Okay. So if I've saved this guy now, I should only get 10 ships, and I do. Now the direction they're shooting out is chosen here, so it's choosing a random direction. It's starting it off at a random X and Y value. But if I come over here to enemy, the speed, each ship gets its own random speed, and each ship, according to its rotation, is going to be moving in that direction. So it looks and sees what's the rotation of the ship, and every time I run this, it changes. Okay, that's all I'm going to cover for today. Have a great day. Bye-bye.